Welcome to our Trump Briefing Show. Today, we're diving into some hot topics making headlines. First up, a little mix-up at the White House. Trump's administration accidentally sent a threatening letter to Harvard University without proper authorization, sparking a standoff over free speech and political influence. Harvard responded firmly, emphasizing their commitment to fighting antisemitism, while the White House stuck to its guns, even threatening Harvard's tax status. Next, we turn to the coal industry, where Trump's efforts to ramp up mining are raising eyebrows. Despite plans to boost coal production, cuts to health and safety agencies threaten miners' well-being, especially with rising black lung cases among younger workers. Critics warn that these policies could lead to more occupational illnesses and less oversight, putting miners at risk. Finally, we're looking at Iran and the US, who are making cautious progress in nuclear talks in Rome. After years of tension, both sides are engaging in indirect negotiations to verify Iran's nuclear program and find common ground. It's a small but significant step toward diplomacy, even as disputes continue. Please continue to watch for more details on these stories. The Independent reports a bizarre and potentially damaging incident involving the Trump administration's attempt to influence Harvard University. A letter from the White House, demanding the university take specific actions to combat antisemitism and align with federal civil rights laws, was reportedly sent, without authorization, and by mistake. The letter, which threatened Harvard with financial ruin if it refused to comply with demands such as ending diversity programs, screening international students, and derecognizing pro-Palestine groups, sparked a tense standoff. Harvard publicly refused to capitulate, emphasizing its efforts to curb campus antisemitism and asserting that the administration's actions had serious real-world consequences. The White House, however, maintained the letter was legitimate, with some officials blaming Harvard for a victimhood campaign, while Harvard questioned the true intent behind the administration's aggressive stance. This incident underscores the ongoing clash over academic freedom and political interference, with Harvard standing firm against what it perceives as unwarranted government overreach. Yahoo US highlights a contrasting yet equally alarming aspect of the Trump administration's policies: its aggressive push to expand coal mining amidst severe cuts to health and safety agencies. President Trump signed executive orders aimed at revitalizing the coal industry, promising to reopen or modernize coal plants, ostensibly to bring miners back to work. However, this industry revival comes at a cost. Agencies like the Mine Safety and Health Administration and the National Institute for Occupational Health and Safety have faced devastating budget cuts, leading to the shutdown of regional offices and the loss of critical research and enforcement capabilities, especially in combating black lung disease and silica dust hazards. Experts like Dr. Greg Wagner, a Harvard professor and former NIOSH advisor, warn that these cuts threaten miners' health and safety, as delays in implementing protective regulations could result in increased cases of deadly diseases. The administration's prioritization of coal expansion, despite the evident health risks, reveals a reckless disregard for worker safety in favor of political and economic ambitions. The Independent also covers the political implications of Elon Musk's role within the Trump administration, with Democrats expressing concern over his potential departure before the midterm elections. Musk's position as a special government employee has made him a prime target for criticism, as his influence has led to significant cuts across federal agencies, including those responsible for public health and worker safety. Democrats fear that if Musk is pushed out or steps down, their ability to leverage his unpopularity in campaign messaging could diminish. Nonetheless, some strategists believe that even without Musk's presence, Democrats can continue to highlight issues like economic inequality and corporate influence, using Musk's controversial actions as a symbol of Republican failure. The overall narrative suggests that Musk's connection to the Trump administration has become a double-edged sword, an effective political tool but also a source of vulnerability if he exits the scene prematurely. The Al Jazeera reports depict a cautiously optimistic phase in Iran's nuclear negotiations with the United States, highlighting a series of indirect talks held in Rome that have been described as constructive by Iranian officials. These discussions, led by Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi and U.S. Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff, marked a significant step since the breakdown of direct diplomacy following the 2018 U.S. withdrawal from the 2015 nuclear accord. The negotiations are progressing at a technical level, with plans for further meetings next week, signaling a potential shift towards renewed dialogue. Despite the positive tone, experts warn that the core issues, particularly Iran's nuclear ambitions, remain complex, with Western concerns over Iran's possible pursuit of nuclear weapons still unresolved. The International Atomic Energy Agency's head Rafael Grossi also indicates Iran is not far from developing a nuclear weapon, adding urgency to the negotiations. Meanwhile, the negotiations are set against a backdrop of strained US-Iran relations, with the US employing sanctions and diplomacy to curb Iran's nuclear program, while Tehran insists its nuclear activities are peaceful. The recent meetings in Muscat and Rome reflect a cautious hope that a mutual understanding might be achievable, even as the devil remains in the details of nuclear compliance and verification. The CBC coverage reveals a tense legal standoff involving the Trump administration's efforts to deport Venezuelan migrants under a wartime law, the Alien Enemies Act of 1798, which has historically been used during wartime. The U.S. Supreme Court's decision to temporarily halt the deportations underscores the fragile balance of power and raises serious questions about the administration's adherence to due process. The case centers on Venezuelan men detained on suspicion of gang affiliation with Tren de Aragua, a violent criminal group, with the government claiming they are alien enemies subject to swift removal without the usual judicial review. Lawyers and human rights advocates, including the ACLU, argue that the administration's actions threaten constitutional protections and could lead to a broader constitutional crisis. The situation is further complicated by the administration's insistence that deportations proceed swiftly, despite legal challenges and concerns over the accuracy of the gang membership claims. The case exemplifies the ongoing debate over executive power versus judicial oversight, with the potential for significant legal and political repercussions as the administration pushes to deport individuals based on national security claims, even amid doubts about their guilt and due process rights. The Nikkei Asia reports that Japan is contemplating an expansion of U.S. rice exports amidst ongoing trade negotiations aimed at countering President Trump's recent tariffs on Japanese goods. The U.S. expressed concerns over Japan's highly regulated rice import system, citing it as a barrier to American exporters, while Japan seeks to quickly identify priority areas for trade liberalization. Tokyo hopes to use increased U.S. rice purchases as a temporary remedy for its domestic rice shortage, which is driven by rising prices and limited supply, especially since the U.S. accounts for 45% of Japan's tariff-free rice imports. The talks also touch on broader issues, including Japan's reluctance to open its auto, steel, and aluminum markets to U.S. demands, with Japanese officials pushing for a comprehensive deal that addresses multiple tariffs, all amidst political sensitivities ahead of upcoming elections. Deutsche Welle highlights China's recent move to halt exports of key raw materials, such as rare earth elements and specialized magnets, critical for high-tech and military industries, including electric vehicles, robotics, and defense equipment. This strategic restriction, coupled with China's new licensing requirements, is intensifying the global race for alternative supplies, especially as Western countries seek to reduce dependence on China. Canada emerges as a promising candidate to fill this gap, boasting vast reserves of critical minerals like rare earths, nickel, and coking coal, with many mines already operational or in the pipeline. However, the deep integration of Chinese investment in Canadian mining, such as Chinese firms' stakes in rare earth and lithium mines, complicates efforts for independence, as China maintains control over processing and pricing, effectively monopolizing parts of the supply chain. The complex geopolitical landscape underscores the urgency for diversification, but also reveals the challenges posed by existing dependencies and the long timelines required to develop new mining projects. The Independent reports on Nigel Farage's political maneuvering, revealing his party's covert discussions with Liz Truss aimed at challenging the blob, a term used to describe the entrenched political and institutional establishment. Farage's strategy appears to involve appealing to disillusioned voters from both the Conservative and Labour parties, especially in former Labour strongholds in the Northeast, by positioning reform as a populist alternative that could disrupt the traditional political duopoly. However, his recent alliance with Truss, who's widely criticized for her failed economic policies and brief tenure as Prime Minister, raises questions about his judgment, especially given her reputation for market chaos and policy missteps. Farage's efforts to distance himself from controversial associations, such as his past closeness to Trump and his stance on NATO, contrast sharply with his apparent willingness to engage with Truss, whose brief premiership ended in market turmoil. Critics argue that aligning with her could damage Farage's credibility, especially since her policies are widely viewed as reckless and destabilizing, and that his focus should be on consolidating his populist base without risking further political liabilities. Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6 Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6 team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6 Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6 Brief via email.